Okay, so in the paper, Market Socialism, actually it's called Who Cares? Market Socialism and Social Reproduction. I'm meant to give a feminist intervention into the debate around market socialism. So feminists have long argued that tasks associated with social reproduction and caregiving more specifically, like childcare, caring for the elderly and vulnerable, are hugely important for human life and our communal living. But these tasks are disproportionately carried out by women and women of color in particular. So, and they're also under capitalism undervalued in that in the market, they're often very poorly paid. And in the private sphere, they're taken to be a so-called labor of love. So that raises for feminists two concerns. One is that it undermines the equal standing of those who provide it, and it also undermines their freedom to pursue their projects. Now, socialists have long argued that socialism actually provides a better alternative to capitalism in realizing values like freedom and equality. And the argument that I want to make in this paper is that if socialism can be, or to the extent that socialism can be a better alternative to capitalism, it needs to make sure to adequately value and equally distribute tasks associated with social reproduction. And more specifically, I'm making the claim that to the extent that social reproduction continues to be organized in markets under a socialist economy, the values of freedom and equality will not be realized for all. And the reason for that is the following. So markets, of course, will play a very different role under a market socialist system than they would under a capitalist system. They will retain their kind of signaling or price signaling function, but they will lose the function of distributing profits. But markets, nonetheless, even under a socialist system, are not neutral. So on the one hand, norms in market exchange determine what kind of resources are actually recognized as resources in a market setting. So that means that due to the tendency to standardize and to quantify goods in market exchanges, markets will not adequately recognize the particularity and the relationality inherent in social reproduction and caregiving more specifically. On the other hand, the type of reciprocity inherent in market settings or in market exchanges is different in kind to the type of reciprocity usually found or inherent in kind of caregiving relations. So in caregiving relations, I care for you not because of what I can get in return, but because I take your ends to be important. And this is different in kind of typical market exchanges. So these are two reasons for why I think that markets will systematically undervalue tasks associated with social reproduction or caregiving more specifically if they're organized in the market, and why I think that a market socialist economy needs to think about a different way to organize tasks associated with social reproduction or caregiving if it wants to be a feminist market socialist economy. Okay, so there has recently been a renewed interest in theorizing a market socialist economy, and as an alternative to both, on the one hand, capitalism and also a centrally planned economy. Now, feminist thinkers and critical race theorists have long argued that kind of different socialist projects need to think about factors beyond class. Most notably, need to think about and integrate factors like gender or race. So my paper is kind of located within that tradition, and I aim to kind of intervene more specifically in the kind of socialist or market socialist debate by thinking about the ways in which the critique or the feminist critique of socialism more generally plays out when markets become part of the mix. And here, and in this sense, the paper adds or aims to add a feminist perspective to the market socialist debate. But it also seeks to more specifically look at the relation between caregiving on the one hand and markets on the other hand. And here, many thinkers have already argued that there is a concern when caregiving is organized in the market, insofar as markets might affect the very nature of care and caregiving. So it might change what caregiving is and how we conceive of it when it is organized in the market. Now, I think that's an important concern, but my argument goes beyond this by thinking more specifically about the ways in which caregiving is recognized, or the kind of social standing of caregiving changes once it's organized in the market. So in that sense, my paper, or the argument in my paper, urges kind of those thinking about market socialism to think more carefully about the ways in which values like freedom and equality can be realized by taking into account the ways in which markets will affect the kind of the realization of these, by taking into account the ways in which market will affect the systematic undervaluation of social reproduction or tasks associated with social reproduction. This paper, I think, provides a few pointers as to how a kind of more equal distribution and a fairer valuation of social reproduction or tasks associated with social reproduction could look like under a socialist economy. But I think more work needs to be done as to how as to the specific institutional proposal or institutional look that this would take. So should social reproduction be funded entirely publicly or kind of provided through public services? Should it be organized perhaps at a communal level and socialized at a communal level? And if it is socialized, to what extent should it be socialized? And maybe we could even think about whether a market socialist economy is even compatible with a fair or feminist organization of social production, even when social production is organized outside of the market. So maybe there's a spillover effect with regards to the way in which market function as to how social reproduction is organized. So I guess these are questions regarding the institutional design that a kind of socialist or market socialist economy could take that would accommodate feminist concerns around social reproduction and caregiving more specifically. I also think there are a few challenges with regards to the institutional design that are raised by the new ways in which caregiving is organized, or kind of the new relations that caregiving has taken in recent years. And these are, for one thing, the automation of a lot of kind of care work in the market, the organization of care work in so-called care platforms, but also care migration. I think all of these kind of recent developments actually provide challenges or raise challenges for a kind of feminist organization of caregiving. So I think that a feminist organization of social reproduction and caregiving will require grappling with all of these questions.